Welcome to the channel. This is going to be a build guide for a tank playstyle on Tainted Grail Fall of Avalon. The game's been out for about a week now, and I've seen a lot of people starting to put out their build guides, most of which I'm noticing are builds like mages, spell swords, archers, rogues, very squishy characters. I've seen a couple two-handed type warriors, still on the more squishy side though. I have not yet seen an actual tank style build. So I figured, why not put out a guide for those of you who are looking to play a more sword and board tank aggro style type of build. This build is absolutely broken. Um, Late game, I figured out a way to just completely break it with skills that I would actually choose sooner if I had known they were going to be this good. But where this build really shines is going to be a matter of the relic choices that I chose to put on my gear, as well as just spending the resources to upgrade the armor rating of your gear, as well as the combination with the skills that I have chosen. So we'll start with the gear itself. We don't really need to go too much into the quick slot stuff. This could be whatever you want. Uh, really, the weapons can be whatever you want. I choose a longsword. You want a shield, obviously, but I choose fire just because I like a more burn play style. But you can replace this with poison as well, or even freeze if you can find the items to do so. Honestly, this build with the spells and stuff have become completely irrelevant after I broke it. So you could really just completely drop the battle mage aspect of it and just go all into endurance with it. I personally like to play a little bit with magic though, so it's up to you in that regard. But let's get into really what breaks this build. So you'll notice the armor doesn't really matter all that much as long as you're upgrading it. I have an over 80% armor cap, and I'm just going to keep growing that. But that's really one of the most important aspects is just whatever armor you're wearing, make sure you get that armor rating up. It's expensive to do, but that needs to be a priority as a tank build. The relics, though, we have Vengeful Spike, and you can get several of these by just going back to the vendor over and over again in the second area, main city. I don't remember her name off the top of my head, but she will respawn these items every day or so if you go back to her. I have 5% on the helmet. We have a lot of stamina reduction and regeneration, which is going to help with your blocking and just not running out of stamina while you're attacking. We have 10% on our gauntlets. We have 10% on our greaves, and we have 10% on our boots. And that is a total of 35% reflect damage from just our gear alone. We also have our cloak, which slowly burns any enemies that come in melee range of us, along with igniting them as soon as they touch you with a melee attack. So we get a lot of burning going on, a lot of status effects. It stacks pretty well. And that's where most of our damage is going to come from, along with some of our skills that we'll go over next. Getting into attributes. As you're building, if you're playing a tank, you really want to focus on endurance. But depending on the weapon that you want to use, you're going to need a certain amount of strength as well. I think to get your first longsword, it's something like 6 strength. So the way I went about it is I spent my first couple levels building up endurance because you want that health as a tank as much as you can. But as soon as you need to upgrade, I think maces are a little bit heavier. They need a higher strength as well. And then your first longsword's definitely going to need strength. So once you get a couple levels of endurance, you're going to want to build up your strength to at least 6, and then you can start going back to endurance. For me, in particular, I like a more battle mage style playthrough. So spirituality, obviously, I started building up a little bit later on just to get a little bit of extra spell power and mana. Practicality, this will help with being able to sell goods for higher prices, getting you more gold so that you can afford those armor upgrades that you need. The crafting bonus is really not that relevant. Weak spot damage helps a little bit, but it's not really that relevant either because we're not doing a ton of just flat melee damage. Really, what you want the practicality for is the stamina and mana reduction on the cost. Um, Spirituality, if you don't want to do spells really, you can invest all this into your endurance because the higher your endurance, that's where a lot of your melee damage is going to come from. And I'll show you why when we get to the skills. Strength, we don't do anything in here yet. Um, you can, if you want, go into the one-handed in general. It's going to give you a little bit of extra damage, but I didn't see it necessary because I'm getting so much damage from just passive status stacking, and most of my damage is coming from just endurance. Endurance, we have our shields. You want to take these pretty early if you're using a shield. Obviously, you're getting increased melee damage just by having a shield equipped. You want to reduce the stamina cost so you're able to hold that shield up longer against multiple enemies. Obviously, just stamina maintenance is going to be really important. You're parrying. You could parry. I don't do it a whole lot, but you still need this because this one right here is what you really need to get to. Reduce the damage taken by 15% while a shield is equipped. We need damage reduction, health, armor, all the most important things when it comes to building a tank. We also worked a little bit on stamina, gain 7 stamina, and we're taking every time we take damage, we restore 5% of max stamina. So this is going to help us more with just our stamina maintenance, obviously. Um, this will make it to where holding up your shield, you're not taking as much stamina from the high damage enemies to block them because a portion of that obviously is going to be damaging you and it's going to restore a little bit of that down. So you're going to get a good reduction in the stamina cost of blocking just by using that. We have nothing in dexterity. Spirituality, again, you can skip over spirituality if you don't want to use the spells and just invest more into the uh, tankiness, which will in turn add more melee damage as well. So you could just stack your endurance up and do it that way. I may end up doing that actually because the spells have become so irrelevant now that, and we'll get into, once we get to practicality, you'll see why this build is so broken at this point. But in spirituality, we did decide to increase our mana. Max health, this one actually is worth investing in spirituality for because your max health is increased by 20% of your maxed mana. So although you could go more into endurance and skip the mana, you'll lose the spell using, obviously. And honestly, you'll probably end up with more health in the end. But I do like using the spells, and I do get the extra health from having the max mana anyway, so it works. And then you get the multiplier from your speed as well, which I think is about 100% for me. So an extra 100% spell power is solid. Combat. This is where you're going to get your your burn effects. So we got spell power 50. We're dealing elemental damage with every corresponding attack. So this will stack up until basically every melee attack you're going to end up stacking fire damage to the point where they ignite on fire. And then you have an extra corresponding damage type based on how many enemies are on fire. This will all stack up when we go to practicality. We have statuses. So you'll do X amount more damage. I have 20%. You can go up to 30% on status effects on them. So once they ignite, they will take 20% more damage from any kind of damage you do to them. And then we have 75% more damage as well on top of that. So a lot of your damage is coming from just the fact that you are passively burning and adding to that passive burn from just weaving in your melee attacks as they hit you. Because again, our cape allows us to add fire stacks to them as well once they hit us with a melee attack. Armor, you really want to focus on this tree. This was by far the most important one because you want to get your armor value up. Uh, and then this one right here, this is where you're getting your melee damage from every endurance point. So because I have 26 endurance points, I'm getting an extra 26% melee damage from just having the endurance. Receiving melee damage returns 25% of it back to the attacker. So this is going to stack with your vengeful spikes to further increase just the reflect damage. So you're doing the passive burn, you're doing a bunch of reflect damage, and then you're also reducing the amount of damage overall that you're taking from the amount of armor you have. Gain up to 20% damage reduction depending on your missing health. Again, more damage reduction, very important for a tank. More armor. We have a 2% chance to negate all incoming damage. This goes up to 6%. I didn't really find it too relevant to continue doing it until maybe later. 6% is not really that much, and we're getting so much damage reduction. And here in a second, we'll see the healing aspect of it as well. That we don't really need to fully negate the damage, but what we did need was your damage negation chance is increased by ×2 when having light equip load and by 1.5 when having medium or equip load. So 2% chance it'll stack with this right here, but this right here is enough anyway to just, you don't really need any more. You can do it if you want, but it's not really necessary. And then we have deal an additional 60% of your armor as damage when attacking with melee weapons. So this is why getting, aside from just being resistant to damage in general, this is going this is why you need to get your armor rating up as much as possible, because it's just going to further stacking with your endurance damage. It's just going to further increase your damage. You don't even need to invest in the strength one-handed stuff at all until later, after if you invest more out of spirituality into a more physical play style, rather than the battle mage, you can go more into the strength just to get even more melee damage. But it's just ridiculous how much damage this puts out. And then what really breaks the build is the healing. So we get the food healing, which is completely irrelevant. I don't even have to use food that often anymore because I don't even really take damage at this point. Um, increasing your incoming healing. So you could stack this up, and that's just going to boost. It's this one right here. This is what breaks it. So for 2 seconds after taking damage, your next hit will heal you for 5% of your max health. So we're boosting our healing with this. Uh, we're increasing our max health with the healing tree as well as with our max mana. And we're also taking all of the other perks that increase our health, and we're stacking endurance. So the higher your health, obviously, the more percentage that this 5% is going to be, or the higher the value of this 5% is going to be. So basically, the way this works is because you're doing so much damage mitigation and you're doing all the passive reflection damage and the burning damage or the poison or cold, whatever you choose to do, you are constantly, even though you're holding up your shield, constantly putting out damage. So any attacks that are being put on you with an enemy nearby you, you're just passively healing yourself for 5% basically every second, and nothing can be done to you basically. We can go into King's Soul, but this isn't really that relevant. You could do whatever you want here. I have receiving less 50% less damage when it's activated, and then when using King's Soul, Weird Shield collects 10%. So this is just going to give an extra mana shield when it ends, uh, just for more irrelevant damage mitigation after you use your power. But we will get into a good Stalker fight, and you can get an idea of how this looks. This is on veteran difficulty, by the way. I don't play on anything less. So if you play on veteran, you have an idea of what this looks like, and you will notice I take no damage. And he can hit me as much as he wants. And y'all know this is probably one of the hardest hitting bosses in the game on veteran mode. This is an enemy that you run away from in terror at night. You see, he did a little bit of damage to me, but then I can just turn around, put up my shield again, do some healing, and I'm good to go. Like, he can't do anything to me. And any passive mobs that you fight at this point are going to do even less damage. I've been playing around this build all day today after I put in that one perk in the healing tree. We'll go back to it just to reiterate. But it's this skill right here, along with just the massive amount of health and the massive amount of damage reduction that you have, and stacking burning, and the reflect damage that you're doing, that it absolutely just breaks the build. So going back now, knowing what I know, I would have taken these skills a little bit earlier. You want to, so starting out, you want to focus on upgrading your armor, getting your heavy armor in, uh, getting your little bit of strength, stacking up your endurance to get your health up, and work for this one skill right here that's just going to absolutely break it once you have all that endurance and resistance. I hope this video was helpful for those of you who like to play a tank play style. Leave a like, comment, and enjoy.